guys, welcome back. Part 2 of this next presidential installment, looking at our 15th president of the United States, James Buchanan. Now, I know in my introduction, I did state that, he was the only president from Pennsylvania, okay? I said that in my opening, my video opening. I know, I'm not foolish to know that Joe Biden, our current president, is technically from Scranton, Pennsylvania, where he was born and lived as a kid. However, yes, he's from Pennsylvania, born there, but, is he really considered from Pennsylvania when you look at his political career? It's kind of like Lincoln. Lincoln was born in Kentucky, lived in Kentucky until he was a young adult. But no one recognizes him being from Kentucky. He's known from being from Illinois because that's where he was from during his political career and his presidency. So, obviously Joe Biden has obviously been a senator from Delaware for over 40 years before he became vice president and now president. So, I guess technically, if you want to get technical, he is from Pennsylvania, but I kind of consider him a Delaware guy. So I'm going to stick with what I said. James Buchanan, only president from Pennsylvania. Because he was born there, lived there, died there, buried there. Joe Biden, more than likely, when he dies one day, will be buried in Delaware. Probably near where his son Beau is, to be completely honest. But here we go. Nonetheless. So let's, with James Buchanan... really what it came down to, when Franklin Pierce was president, obviously not a good presidency, the Democrats, they didn't even renominate Pierce to run again for re-election. Basically, the motto was like anybody but Pierce. So the Democrats nominated a very dull politician who seemed likely to offend the fewest voters, and that was Buchanan. So he was a Democrat from Pennsylvania, as I said. He was a Southern sympathizer. He's often called a doughface. Buchanan's view on slavery was more or less that it left it undisturbed. The institution would eventually go away. He was likely personally opposed to slavery, but believed it was a matter for states to decide, and that it was protected under the Constitution. And basically these, fence-straddling views landed him the nickname Doughface because he was a Northerner who adhered to Southern principles. That's really what it came down to. He did, because of his Southern sympathizing and his views on slavery, he did win all of the Southern states in the election, and he basically walked away with the election. He had been a Secretary of State, of course, like I said. He had been in Congress. In fact, he spent the previous 4 years before he was elected president as the minister to Great Britain. So, he was no rookie to politics and to what, went into being a politician. Like I said at the end of part 1, he was just a very fussy, unimaginative man. He actually, when it came to slavery, Buchanan actually stated in his inaugural address that the issue of slavery was a judicial issue and that the court would decide. And he said, we will happily obey whatever the court decides. He just didn't take a stand. That was the big problem when it came to James Buchanan. He just didn't take a stand on things. And that's why he's so revered as like one of the worst presidents of all time, because he just never took a stand. Interesting thing, some little side note things about James Buchanan. He actually suffered from poor vision. Multiple portraits showed the 6-foot Buchanan almost always cocking his head to the left. As a defect in one of his eyes, it made him tilt his head in a perpetual attitude of courteous deference and attentive interest. Ophthalmologists today believe he may have suffered from exodeviation, which is a form of wandering eye, basically. So, little interesting fun fact about his eyesight. He actually drank a lot, but he wasn't a drunk. Novelist Nathaniel Hawthorne said that Buchanan takes his wine like a true man, and there were plenty of anecdotes to support that notion. Historian Mark Will Weber writes that Buchanan's contemporaries were wowed by his ability to consume vast amounts of wine and whiskey. He once drank 16 toasts on the 4th of July while as a student at Dickinson College in 1808. He had a well-stocked wine cellar famed for its vintages, and he would drink 2 or 3 bottles in a single sitting, sandwiched in between glasses of cognac and rye. And he would purchase 10-gallon casks of whiskey on Sundays from the distiller Jacob Bear. After his inauguration in 1857, Buchanan told his liquor merchants the champagne bottles delivered in pints were far too small, and the press commented on his resisting power against the fumes of intoxicating drinks while others tried and failed to keep up. More than one ambitious tyro who sought to follow his example gathered in early fall. So pretty fun, interesting stuff. He apparently liked his alcohol and his wine. And touching on that, I'm actually going to show you what is known as the Revere Tavern. The Revere Tavern is located in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to give you a little history. It actually dates back to 1740. The stone building, formerly called the Sign of the Spread Eagle, was a stage tavern. It was one of the better inns along the 62 miles of turnpike stretching from Philadelphia to Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and it catered to the more prosperous class of travelers, providing him with accommodations suited to his means. Fine liquors and fine foods were served in generous portions to satisfy the hearty appetites generated by a long day in a rocking, jolting stagecoach. Almost a century later, after it was built in 1841, the tavern would become the residence of Reverend Edward V. Buchanan and his wife Eliza Foster Buchanan. That's James's parents. While the Reverend established and served as a pastor of the All Saints Episcopal Church in Paradise, Pennsylvania, Eliza, his wife, was the sister of Stephen Foster, whose immortal songs will always be a part of America. Foster not only penned some of his music here, but he also sent many of his manuscripts to his sister, a talented musician in her own right, for her approval. Here on the banks of the Pequea, Eliza and Stephen played many of the 200 songs written by Stephen, which include My Old Kentucky Home, Way Down Upon the Swanee River, and Oh Susanna. Pretty cool. In 1854, shortly before Edward and Eliza moved to a new pastorate, the building was purchased by Edward's brother, James Buchanan. So see, I take that back. See, I already messed up. It wasn't his parents. That's actually his brother, Edward, and his wife. So it was his brother, Edward, and his wife, which was James Buchanan's sister-in-law. So not his parents. I apologize. So the building was purchased by James Buchanan in 1854. And through the generations, the Revere Tavern has preserved a tradition of quality and abundance. So pretty interesting stuff. It still stands. I didn't go inside, but the pictures that you're actually seeing on your screen, that is the Revere Tavern. And I'm going to show you a few more pictures here. That's all the Revere Tavern. It's pretty cool. Like I said, it's right there. It's not far from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But James Buchanan once owned this tavern, bought it from his brother, which, I don't know, pretty interesting thing in my opinion, especially because he was known as such an alcohol connoisseur that he was. So pretty interesting. Moving right back along with some of the interesting stuff when it came to Buchanan. The Compromise candidate in 1856. So, as I said, Buchanan's ambition was to become president. In 1856, he was listed as one of several possible Democratic candidates. You know, there's a lot of great strife in the country, of course, the Bleeding Kansas, all this stuff. So Buchanan won with 45% of the popular vote because Millard Fillmore caused the Republican vote to be split. So that's what happened in 1856. And really, what can be said about his presidency? It just was bad. It was just marked with a lot of really bad stuff. And really, the most detrimental thing, probably, or one of the most, was the Dred Scott ruling. So basically, the Supreme Court had been deliberating over a case that was actually as controversial as Roe versus Wade or the Bush-Gore 2000 election decision, and that was the lawsuit from slave Dred Scott. The Dred Scott case represented an attempt by the judicial branch to resolve conflict that clearly the first two branches of government had failed to resolve. The presidency and the legislature had not been able to figure out what to do about slavery. And so the judiciary, the Supreme Court, stepped in. Dred Scott, basically what he did was he sued for his freedom. Because he had been living with his master in free territories in the North, Dred Scott thought, well, wait a minute, why should I still be an enslaved man? I'm living in the North where it's, free of slavery, so I want my freedom, which obviously is understandable to all of us. And he sued for that, and so basically what happened was, unfortunately, the Supreme Court ruled against him. And this is really, really hard for me to even say because it's so awful and terrible, but the Supreme Court decided that Dred Scott was a possession with no legal standing. They ruled that, in fact, he was not a citizen of the United States, meaning no black person could be a citizen of the United States, and therefore that blacks were property. They were no different than a piece of land or a piece of furniture. And James Buchanan, who was our president at the time, he took the only position that a fussy lawyer from Pennsylvania could possibly take, which is, that's the law, that settles it, and it's over. He did nothing. He didn't step in. He didn't interject. He did not try to side with Dred Scott, which is obviously the right thing to do. He did nothing. And Buchanan truly thought that the debate over slavery had been settled. He thought because of this case, because the Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott had no rights and was property, Buchanan thought that's it. There was no legal precedent for counteracting a Supreme Court ruling. So that was it. And you know what? That is to say, even if Buchanan had wanted to, and the truth is he did not. He did not want to overrule or counteract the Supreme Court's ruling on this case. It was basically just another case of someone who stood by as the car was going towards the cliff and then eventually went over the cliff. That's really what it is. He did nothing. He truly did nothing. And it's sad because, it's a really bad thing. It's the North versus the South thing. We were probably already headed. The wheels were probably in motion towards civil war. But Buchanan, even though his predecessors like Pierce and Fillmore, they didn't do anything either, but Buchanan did nothing. He did nothing to stop this. He did nothing to try to bring some peace between the North and the South. He did nothing. He didn't want any part of it. He like I said, he believed that slavery was a constitutional right. He believed that the Supreme Court's hearing of the Dred Scott case would end the discussion about the constitutional legality of enslavement. And basically, when the Supreme Court decided that enslaved people should be considered property and that Congress had no right to exclude enslavement from the territories, Buchanan used this to bolster his belief that enslavement was constitutional. He mistakenly believed that this decision would end sectional strife, and instead, obviously, just did the opposite. It's just terrible. The 1850s would have been a different time if we actually had presidents who were leaders, who were not willing to give everything to slavery and nothing to freedom. And Buchanan would have been different if he actually had a backbone, but he didn't. And that's the problem. He just didn't have a backbone. He just did nothing about any of it. So pretty bad when it came to, the slavery issue and Buchanan. So another thing, John Brown's raid in October of 1859, abolitionist John Brown led 18 men on a raid to seize the armory in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. His goal was to foment an uprising that would eventually lead to a war against enslavement. And Buchanan sent the U.S. Marines and Robert E. Lee against the raiders who were captured. And John Brown was hanged for murder, treason, and conspiring with enslaved people. And the crazy thing is, Buchanan sent the people to go get him. Another just absolute craziness. Just unreal. What else can I tell you? The Lecompton Constitution, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, gave the residents of the Kansas Territory the ability to decide for themselves whether they wanted to be a free state or a pro-slavery state. We know that because we touched on the Kansas-Nebraska Act in the past. Many constitutions were proposed. Buchanan supported and fought strenuously for the Lecompton Constitution, which would have made enslavement legal. And Congress could not agree, and it was sent back to Kansas for a general vote, and it was soundly defeated. This event also had the key effect of splitting the Democratic Party into Northerners and Southerners. So there you go. We keep going with Buchanan, Dred Scott, and the Lecompton Constitution, and the John Brown Raid. It just was strike after strike after strike against Buchanan. Just terrible, the way he handled it all. And when Abraham Lincoln won the presidential election of 1860, 7 states quickly seceded from the Union and formed the Confederate States of America. Buchanan believed that these states were within their rights and that the federal government did not have the right to force the state to remain in the Union. This is a man from Pennsylvania. Do you guys understand that? I mean, let's face facts. There's not many states more north of Pennsylvania. You know, you have New Jersey, New York, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island. There's not many. I mean, Pennsylvania is north. And this is what this man believed. Unbelievable. And Buchanan, he also attempted to avoid war in many ways. He made a truce with Florida that no additional federal troops would be stationed at Fort Pickens in Pensacola, and unless Confederate troops opened fire upon it. And further, he ignored aggressive acts upon ships carrying troops to Fort Sumter off the South Carolina coast. And if anyone knows anything about Fort Sumter in South Carolina, that was basically the beginning of the Civil War due to the battle there. So, crazy. He did nothing. But he did actually support Lincoln during the Civil War, James Buchanan. He retired upon leaving the presidential office, and he supported Lincoln and his actions throughout the war. He actually wrote Mr. Buchanan's administration on the eve of the rebellion to defend his actions when secession occurred. So he was just a kind of a spineless guy. I know that sounds really mean and terrible to say about a president, but he just was. He was actually thrilled when he lost the election and then and Abraham Lincoln became president. He was thrilled to turn over the reins to Lincoln, to his successor. He actually told Abraham Lincoln when they were going to the inauguration, if you are happy coming into this office as I am leaving it, then you are the happiest man in the world. That is the words of James Buchanan. He told Lincoln that if you are as happy coming into this office as I am to leave it, then you are literally the happiest man in the world. That is nuts. Crazy. What we're going to take a look at here to kind of wrap things up, go full circle, I'm going to show you there was a lady by the name of Ann Caroline Coleman. She actually is a historical figure. She was the fiancée of future President James Buchanan, and she broke off their engagement over unclear circumstances and then died mysteriously shortly thereafter. She was the daughter of a very wealthy iron manufacturing businessman, Robert Coleman. So pretty interesting stuff there. So basically, what had happened, Buchanan's colleagues from the House of Representatives, she was a sister-in-law, maybe. I think it was Ann's sister-in-law was married to a Philadelphia judge, and he was one of Buchanan's colleagues from the House of Reps, and he introduced Ann and James. And when James, he spent little time with her during the courtship. He was extremely busy with his law firm and political projects during the Panic of 1819, which took him away from Coleman for weeks at a time, and conflicting rumors abounded, suggesting that he was marrying her for her money because his family was less affluent than hers was, or that he was involved with other women, there was rumors. Buchanan never publicly spoke of his motives or feelings, but letters from Anne revealed she was paying heed to the rumors. By all accounts, Ann Coleman was a lovely young lady who was known to be shy, sensitive, and very beautiful. They were engaged, as I said. She broke off their engagement under unclear circumstances. And on December 9th of 1819, she died of possibly an overdose of laudanum. Her death has long been speculated to be a suicide, actually. So pretty interesting stuff there. And, you know, another interesting thing about Ann Coleman, Buchanan, here I'll read you a little excerpt. Future President James Buchanan was briefly engaged to Ann Caroline Coleman in 1819. She was reportedly unhappy with his lack of attention, and she broke off the engagement, then died, possibly of a deliberate overdose, suicide. Buchanan remained a bachelor for the next 50 years, but spent 15 years living with William Rufus King, who was Franklin Pierce's vice president. And there was conjecture at the time that Buchanan and King were homosexuals. So there was just a lot of different rumors going around, and there's been long speculation that Buchanan was possibly gay. Of course, we can't prove that. He entered into Congress 1821, Senator 1834, and during that time he actually met in the Senate. He met William Rufus King. The two lived together at Mrs. Ironside's boarding house on 10th and F Streets in Washington. This kind of roommate arrangement wasn't uncommon for young congressional newcomers, but since James Buchanan and William Rufus King were both older and were independently wealthy at the time, the fact that they roomed together for like 15 years and remained inseparable for the remainder of their lives incited vicious gossip. Andrew Jackson referred to King and Buchanan respectively as Miss Nancy and Aunt Fancy, and a newspaper described the relationship as conspicuous intimacy. After Rufus King departed for France in 1844, Buchanan wrote to a friend, "I am now solitary and alone, having no companion in the house with me. I have gone a-wooing several gentlemen, but have not succeeded with any of them." Evidence suggests that after Buchanan won the 1856 presidential election, his niece Harriet Lane and King's niece Catherine Ellis destroyed letters from their correspondence. Harriet Lane, she actually became kind of like the acting first lady during his presidency, because he was the only bachelor president ever. Historians and writers have also speculated Buchanan may have been asexual, as his volumes of papers and letters never mention love, lust, women, romance, or physical attractions to either sex. So really, who knows? But this woman, Ann Caroline Coleman, she, you've been seeing the pictures on your screen, mixed in with some other pictures. That's her gravesite there. She's actually buried right in Lancaster, Pennsylvania at the St. James Episcopal Church Cemetery. So that's her gravesite there, what you're seeing on the screen. But yeah, a lot of speculation whether or not he was possibly a homosexual or not. He was the only president who was a lifelong bachelor, though. He remained a bachelor. Of course, the rumors with him and King, who knows? He was reportedly pretty broke up when Coleman died. Supposedly, he was, pretty broke up about the whole thing. Like I said, being a bachelor and not married, his niece, as I mentioned, Harriet Lane, she acted as the first lady while he was in the White House, and she became quite popular and was nicknamed the Democratic Queen, Harriet Lane, which is Buchanan's niece, right here on the screen as you're seeing. So interesting stuff there. And then also now what I think we should take a look at briefly is the home that he lived at, which is Wheatland, James Buchanan's house. It's a brick federal-style house in Lancaster. It was constructed in 1828 by William Jenkins, a local lawyer. And eventually, Wheatland changed hands again, 1848. 1848 is when Buchanan bought it. And he occupied the house for the next 2 decades. And interestingly enough, Buchanan, he would return to Wheatland sporadically and never for very long. and he returned finally to Wheatland in 1861 after the election of Abraham Lincoln and the end of his term as president. And right here, this building that you're seeing on the screen, that's Wheatland, and that is where James Buchanan, our 15th president, died in a room on the second floor on June 1st of 1868. Thousands of people attended Buchanan's funeral and the procession from Wheatland to the Woodward Hill Cemetery on June 4th. And the estate, the Wheatland estate, was actually inherited by Harriet Lane, his niece, and she used it as a summer house. So pretty interesting. And so that's Wheatland, where Buchanan lived. And then we move on to the final thing here. Actually, right before I show you his gravesite, I'm going to show you there's a statue that you're seeing now on your screen of James Buchanan that's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, where Wheatland is and where his gravesite is. And as you see from these pictures on the screen, the statue, it almost looks like something out of like a Charles Dickens novel. You know, like it doesn't really represent president too well. It definitely looks like a Charles Dickens novel character. It looks like somebody that would have been in A Christmas Carol or something. So pretty funny stuff there. So that's that little statue. And now, finally, last but not least, the gravesite of our 15th president, James Buchanan. Buchanan is buried at the Woodward Hill Cemetery in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. He was, of course, like I just said, died on June 8th of 1868. He was 77 years old. And as you see from the pictures on your screen, nothing, it's a pretty basic, grave site. There's nothing much to it. Of course, he was never married, didn't have any children, so there's nobody like that buried with him. You'll actually notice I visited it twice. Once in the spring, which is kind of the sunny pictures, and once in the fall when it was kind of, dark and a dark fall day. But interestingly enough, as you notice from the spring sunny pictures, someone had placed a rainbow flag there by his grave, as you can see on the screen. Obviously, the rainbow flag being the gay pride flag for the gay and lesbian communities and that sort of thing. It's kind of their gay pride symbol, the rainbow flag. So somebody did, put that there. So again, even in death, the speculation of what his sexuality was, still lingers to this day, many years later. So interesting stuff. So there's his gravesite of the 15th president of the United States. Unfortunately, the man who holds the distinction in many historians' eyes as being the worst president that we've ever had in the United States of America, James Buchanan. There you go. So I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Hope you enjoyed the life and legacy of James Buchanan, our 15th president. And of course, here we go. Stay tuned. There's actually a commercial up on my YouTube channel for our Lincoln series. It's going to be a 4-part series. Usually these are done in 2 parts. Lincoln is going to be in 4 parts. We're going to take a look at everything Lincoln. Birthplace, childhood home, his presidency, Lincoln Memorial, where he was shot and assassinated, where he's buried, where he lived in Illinois. All of it. It's going to be fascinating. So stay tuned. That starts next week, our Lincoln series. Hope you enjoyed this. As always, thank you so much for all the support. Definitely all the subscribers. Really appreciate it. Keep those comments and questions coming. We love those. And, we will see you guys soon. Thanks again, guys. Bye-bye now.